Vampires in the time of Oblivion. The Imperial Province knows darkness differently than its neighbors. In Cyrodiil, shadows fall not from jagged mountains or ancient forests, but from marble columns and velvet curtains. Here, even monsters wear civilization like a well-tailored robe. When? The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion first revealed its vampires to players, the curse manifested not as bestial horror, but as aristocratic affliction. These were not the ice-blooded predators of Skyrim's frozen wastes, but elegant parasites moving through society's highest echelons, their condition a secret shared only in whispers and sealed letters. The Cyrodiilic vampires, particularly those of the ancient Cyrodiil bloodline, viewed their condition through a lens of perverse nobility. They did not hide in caves or abandoned forts. They walked among mortals as their betters, their enhanced senses and supernatural charisma tools for manipulation, rather than mere survival. Your mortal life was merely preparation, they would tell new initiates. Only now do you begin your true existence. 3 stages mark the progression of vampirism in Cyrodiil. With each passing day without feeding, the vampire's powers grew stronger. Enhanced strength, improved night eye, greater resistance to frost. But so too did their weaknesses and the telltale signs that revealed their nature. The sun became increasingly unbearable, burning pale skin like fire. Mortals would sense the wrongness, the hunger radiating from them. Yet most fascinating was how Cyrodiil society accommodated these predators. Unlike the fearful Nordic villages where suspected vampires faced immediate execution, imperial culture developed subtle codes and systems. Certain inns kept blood potions in hidden stock for wealthy, pale-skinned patrons. Noble houses maintained lightless guest quarters. Servants might be paid extra to donate to their lord's peculiar midnight appetites. The Count of Skingrad himself, Janus Hassildor, maintained his position of authority despite his condition. His secret was protected not just by loyal retainers, but by the empire itself, which valued stability over purity. A competent vampire ruler, after all, could serve for centuries without the inconvenience of succession crises. This political pragmatism extended to how vampirism was studied. The Mages Guild maintained careful records of the condition, analyzing it not as abomination, but as transformative magic. Vampires themselves often became scholars of their own condition, researching bloodlines and powers across centuries, accumulating knowledge impossible in a mortal lifespan. The Cyrodiil strain carried distinctive traits. Their eyes glowed a striking amber orange in darkness. Their skin paled progressively with hunger rather than permanently. They could move among mortals undetected if recently fed. Most importantly, they retained full intelligence and personality, the transformation enhancing rather than replacing their original nature. This made them infinitely more dangerous than mindless predators. A vampire of the Cyrodiil bloodline might conduct business, maintain political alliances, and cultivate influence across generations. They experienced their condition not as a descent into monstrosity, but as an ascension above mortality's limitations. Time becomes a different substance, one ancient vampire wrote in a journal recovered from the Arcane University archives. You watch empires rise and fall like theater performances, knowing you alone will witness both opening night and final curtain. For players of Oblivion who contracted the condition, this duality provided a unique experience. Vampirism offered power at a price. Strengthened abilities balanced against vulnerability to sun and fire, increased attributes against social ostracism if discovered. It was a nuanced affliction, where feeding became not just mechanical survival, but a moral choice enacted night after night, century after century. But beneath this sophisticated veneer lay the uncomfortable truth that the elegant, controlled vampires of Cyrodiil were still servants of Molag Bal. Their refinement merely disguised the same brutal origins as their more feral cousins. The Crimson Ribbons all led back to the same Daedric prince, the same original violation. For all their poetry and philosophy about transcending mortality, the vampires of Cyrodiil remained what they had always been, prisoners of an eternal thirst, bearing chains forged in Cold Harbor, each feeding an unwitting ritual honoring their true master. Their curse merely wore a finer mask than most. Lamé Bal, the hidden origin. Every curse has a first victim, patient zero of a spreading darkness. For vampirism, her name echoes across millennia. Lamé Beolfag, though history would rename her Lamé Bal, forever marking her as property of the god who broke her. The scrolls and songs tell of a Nedic tribeswoman in the early days of Tamriel, when mortals first walked beneath unfamiliar stars. Beautiful, devout to Arche, god of life and death. Perhaps this devotion itself drew Molag Bal's attention. The Daedric prince of domination despises nothing more than sincere worship directed elsewhere. His attack was not random violence, but calculated sacrilege. On her way to be wed, Lamé was found by Bal's servants and brought before their master. What followed was not simply murder, not merely violation. It was ritual transformation. The Daedric prince's mockery of Arche's natural order. He ravaged her, pierced her with his own corrupted blood, and left her to die in the wilderness, her body broken but unable to embrace Arche's release. Death approached, then retreated. Arche's priests found her burning with fever, raving deliriously. They tried healing incantations, poultices, prayers, but the corruption spreading through her veins answered to older, darker powers. On the third night, the transformation completed. The woman who awoke was Lamé no longer. Her eyes opened not to starlight, but to hunger, raw, insatiable, and eternal. The priests who had tended her became her first feast. Their blood could not satisfy her rage, only fuel it. Arche no longer concerns himself with your soul, Molag Bal whispered through the veil between worlds. You belong to me now, in life beyond death. Thus began vampirism, not as gift but as violation, not as transcendence but as torture disguised as immortality. Lamé fled into the night, her mind consumed by twin hungers, blood to sustain her unnatural existence, and vengeance against both the god who abandoned her and the one who claimed her. Over centuries, she created others like herself, not out of loneliness or desire for companionship, but as weapons in her private war against divinity itself. Each new vampire was an affront to Arche's domain, each feeding a mockery of his natural cycles. Her methods differed from her creators. Where Molag Bal violated through force and pain, Lamé often offered vampirism as salvation to the desperate, the dying, the betrayed. She appeared to them in their darkest moments with honeyed promises, seductive half-truths about power and vengeance against those who wronged them. The gods have abandoned you, she would whisper, but I will never leave my children. Her bloodline spread through early Tamriel like a shadow beneath history's surface, a matrilineal counterpoint to the more recognized strains that would later be directly created through the brutal Cold Harbor ritual. Her children shared distinctive traits, an aversion to fire that bordered on phobia, extraordinary healing abilities, and a peculiar connection to Arche's sphere that allowed them to sense death approaching others. Most significant was their ability to appear utterly mortal while well-fed. Unlike other vampire strains whose eyes betrayed them, Lamé's descendants could hide their nature completely, moving through mortal society undetected for centuries. The Blood Matron's cult persisted in secrecy, venerating her not as monster, but as dark saint, the first mother who turned violation into power. Their hidden shrines inverted Arche's symbols. Their rituals mocked the prayers she once faithfully offered. Some whispered she still walked Tamriel, neither truly awake nor at rest, caught between vengeance completed and vengeance impossible. For how does one truly take revenge against a Daedric prince? How does the tool rebel against its maker? The bitter truth remains. that while Lamai might see herself as Molag Bal's greatest enemy, she is in reality his most successful creation. Each vampire turned from her bloodline feeds his influence in Mundus. Each soul corrupted furthers his dominion over mortality. The very rage that drives her serves the prince who violated her. The curse continues not despite her rebellion, but because of it. And in the shadows of Oblivion, Molag Bal still laughs. The curse spreads through Tamriel. Blood adapts to soil. As vampirism spread across Tamriel's varied landscapes, it did not remain uniform, but evolved. Each province's culture, climate, and collective fears shaping distinct strains of the same fundamental curse. In Cyrodiil, vampirism found fertile ground in imperial obsession with hierarchy and status. The Cyrodiil bloodline cultivated secrecy and infiltration, viewing their condition as aristocratic elevation rather than bestial regression. They formed hidden societies within noble houses, establishing blood banks among willing or enchanted servants, and creating elaborate codes to identify fellow night children without alerting mortals. Their political structure mirrored imperial bureaucracy, ancient vampires ruling as unseen counts and countesses, with hierarchies of lessers handling daylight affairs and procuring sustenance. Power came not merely from blood drinking but from knowledge accumulated across centuries, and connections maintained through generations of mortal pawns. Across the border in Valenwood, vampirism expressed itself differently. The Bosmer bloodline became one with the forest's savage heart, embracing feral transformation rather than resisting it. These vampires abandoned civilization entirely, becoming one with the most primal aspects of the Green Pact. "We do not drink blood," claimed one captured Bosmer vampire before his execution. "We commune with it. Each life taken feeds not just our hunger, but the forest itself." Valenwood vampires developed unparalleled abilities to control plants and animals, often making homes within the flesh of living trees, or commanding packs of wolves as extensions of their will. Their society was tribal rather than hierarchical, with transformation rituals incorporating elements of the wild hunt and ancient Bosmer flesh magic. The desert province of Hammerfell bred perhaps the most feared variant. The Alakar bloodline evolved to hunt in the most inhospitable conditions of endless sand and merciless sun. They developed extraordinary resistance to sunlight, enabling them to strike when travelers least expected danger. Moving beneath the sands themselves, emerging only to feed, these vampires became desert legends that Redguard mothers used to frighten disobedient children. "The thirsty ones come when the dunes grow cold," went the warning. "They drink more than your water." Most distinct of all were the vampires of Black Marsh, where the Hist's influence created something barely recognizable as vampirism. Argonian vampires maintained their connection to the Hist trees even after transformation, creating a unique variant where bloodthirst was supplemented by the need to periodically commune with corrupted Hist sap. These vampires could breathe underwater indefinitely and regenerate lost limbs, but were bound to their ancestral marshes by mystical connections impossible to sever. Despite these variations, certain universal truths bound all vampire strains together. All traced their origins, directly or indirectly, to Molag Bal. All required blood to maintain their existence. All existed in tension with mortal society, sometimes as open predators, sometimes as secret infiltrators, but always as something other. This diversity created complex vampire politics that spanned provinces and centuries. Ancient blood feuds erupted between competing strains, with purges and territory disputes that mortal histories never recorded. Diplomatic summits were held in shadow reflections of mortal courts, where vampire lords negotiated feeding territories and exchange of knowledge about their evolving conditions. Most fascinating was how vampires adapted to changing times. As the Third Era progressed and imperial influence standardized culture across Tamriel, the more sophisticated strains began sharing techniques and knowledge. Cyrodiilic principles of infiltration were adopted by Nordic vampires. Bestial hunting methods from Valenwood enhanced the capabilities of Hammerfell's desert predators. The greatest innovation came with blood magic research conducted jointly by mages from multiple strains. They discovered methods to dilute weaknesses, enhance strengths, and even temporarily walk in daylight through complex alchemical preparations. Blood potions became valuable currency in vampire circles, with recipes guarded more jealously than gold. Yet for all their adaptation and evolution, all vampires shared the same unspoken fear, that they were never truly free of their creator. That Molag Bal watched their struggles, their politics, their beliefs in autonomy, with the same amusement a child watches ants in a glass case. For regardless of strain or century or province, every drop of blood spilled in hunger served the Prince of Domination. Every soul corrupted extended his influence. Every vampire who believed themselves master was, in the cosmic accounting of Oblivion, still merely servant. The chains might vary in length and weight, but they all led back to Cold Harbor. Vampires in Skyrim, from horror to power. The North transforms everything it touches. In Skyrim's bitter cold, even undeath takes on a harsher aspect. When players first encountered vampires in the frozen province, the shift from Oblivion's elegant predators was striking. Gone were the aristocratic infiltrators moving through society with practiced deception. In their place stalked creatures of more primal hunger, vampire thralls hissing from ice-encrusted caves, feral outcasts prowling ancient Nordic ruins, predators who had abandoned pretense of humanity. This was no accident of game design, but a deliberate reflection of how the curse adapted to Nordic culture. Where imperial society valued subtlety and manipulation, Nord values of strength and direct confrontation shaped a vampirism that wore its power openly. At the apex of this transformation stood Clan Volkihar, the most ancient and terrible of Skyrim's vampire bloodlines. Their abilities transcended those seen in Cyrodiil. They could freeze blood in victims' veins with a gesture, summon ice storms through sheer will, and survive submerged beneath frozen lakes for months, emerging to attack from below when prey ventured onto winter ice. Power need not hide, Lord Harkon would tell his court. Let mortals tremble at our approach, rather than discover too late what walks among them. The Volkihar physical transformation was more complete than southern strains. Their eyes burned supernatural gold or crimson. Their features grew bat-like with hunger. Most dramatically, those of pure bloodline could transform into vampire lords, monstrous winged forms that abandoned all human pretense, embodying the raw power Molag Bal had first unleashed through Lamai. Yet for all their differences, connections to Cyrodiil's vampires remained. Both bloodlines valued lineage and purity, maintaining careful records of their families. Both established complex courts with centuries-old politics and rivalries. Both viewed mortals as lesser beings meant to serve their needs. The key divergence lay in philosophy. Cyrodiil vampires sought to remain hidden, preserving their existence through secrecy and strategic feeding. Volkihar dreamed of dominion, a world where night would fall eternally, where vampires would rule openly as the superior predators they believed themselves to be. This ambition found its ultimate expression in the tyranny of the Sun prophecy, a scheme to use an Elder Scroll and Auriel's bow to blot out the sun itself, eliminating their greatest weakness. Such grand apocalyptic planning would have seemed vulgar to the subtle Cyrodiilic covens, who preferred patient infiltration over dramatic confrontation. Yet both approaches, in their way, served Molag Bal's ultimate design. The social structure of Volkihar reflected their Nordic environment. Where Cyrodiil vampires created elaborate bureaucracies, Volkihar organized more like a warrior clan, with clear hierarchies based on strength, age, and proximity to the original bloodline. Castle Volkihar stood as monument to this might makes right philosophy, a fortress rather than the hidden mansions preferred by southern kin. Feeding rituals, too, reflected cultural differences. Cyrodiil vampires typically fed delicately, often from willing subjects, sometimes sustaining relationships with regular donors over decades. Volkihar preferred the hunt, the chase, the terror, the complete consumption of their prey. Their feasting halls featured humans suspended upside down over troughs, drained slowly for both sustenance and entertainment. Yet despite these regional distinctions, the core truth of vampirism remained consistent across Tamriel. It was power purchased through addiction and servitude. No vampire, no matter how ancient or mighty, could escape the fundamental hunger that defined their existence. No vampire lord, not even Harkon himself, could truly call himself master while bound by thirst to Molag Bal's ancient curse. The question faced by every vampire, whether skulking through Imperial City's sewers or holding court in Castle Volkihar, remained the same. Was immortality worth eternal slavery to hunger? Was power worth permanent alienation from the natural world? For the player transformed into vampire in either game, these philosophical questions became gameplay choices, each feeding a moral decision. Each century lived a deeper investment in a fundamentally corrupted existence. From horror to power, from predator to prey, from master to servant, the vampire walks eternal contradictions with each step. And the Prince of Domination watches, always watches, as his children struggle against chains they themselves embrace, with every drop they drink. Molag Bal's Eternal Pact. Nothing, Daedric, comes without purpose. The princes do not create on whim or passion. Every gift a calculation, every curse a strategy. Why then did the Lord of Domination unleash vampirism upon Nirn? What cosmic game pieces did he advance by transforming Lamai Beolfag from devoted maiden to immortal predator? The answer lies not in cruelty alone, though cruelty is ever Molag Bal's method, but in the nature of Daedric influence itself. The princes cannot walk freely in Mundus. Since the lighting of the dragonfires, since Akatosh's compact with Alessia, the barriers between Oblivion and mortal realms have stood firm. Direct intervention requires invitation, requires breaking of rules, requires mortals to willingly open doors that should remain sealed. Vampirism is such a door, permanently ajar. Each vampire is my shrine, Molag Bal once whispered to a terrified priest of Arkay. Each feeding, my sacrament. Through them I taste what is denied me. The Prince of Domination created vampires as extensions of himself, living, hunting emblems of his sphere that could walk freely where he could not. Each bloodline, whether acknowledged or not, serves as conduit for his influence to seep into Mundus. The elegant Cyrodiilic courtier, the bestial Volkihar lord, the green-fused Bosmer hunter, all unwitting priests performing ritual sacrifice with every throat opened. This is the terrible genius of the curse. It perpetuates through the very addiction it creates. The vampires need blood to survive. The need drives them to feed. Each feeding extends Molag Bal's reach. The cycle requires no further intervention from its creator, no maintenance, no oversight. It is self-sustaining domination. More insidious still is how each bloodline believes itself free of the prince's control. The Volkihar court with their prophecies of Sun's end. The Cyrodiilic covens with their political manipulations. All convinced they serve only their own ambitions. None recognize the invisible strings that connect their every achievement back to Cold Harbor. The Daedric prince designed his creation with sublime psychological insight. Vampires experience their condition as power, as elevation, as transcendence of mortal limitations. This illusion of supremacy blinds them to their true nature as vessels, cups that can never be filled, hunger that can never be satisfied. Thirst serving only to extend the influence of the very being they often claim to have outgrown. Each bloodline carries specific traits that reflect aspects of their creator's nature. The Volkihar, dominance and brutality. the Cyrodiilic manipulation and corruption of systems, the Alik'r patient, relentless hunting, all facets of Molag Bal's domain, all instruments playing different parts in the same terrible symphony. The ultimate evidence of this connection manifests at death, when a vampire is truly destroyed, not merely slain in physical form, but soul-severed from the curse. They do not find the peaceful release of Arkay's wheel. They do not join their ancestors in traditional afterlives. Their souls belong to Molag Bal by right of creation, drawn inexorably to Cold Harbor like moths to flame. There, in his realm of eternal domination and servitude, former vampire lords who ruled for centuries find themselves slaves once more. Former predators become prey to more terrible hunters. Former immortals learn the true meaning of eternity, not as freedom from death, but as endless subjugation to the prince who made them. This is the final clause in Molag Bal's contract, the truth hidden in the small print of vampiric existence. The curse offers not escape from death, but merely postponement of judgment. Not immortality, but extended servitude. Not power, but the illusion of power. "My children return to me," the prince has been heard to say, "and only when they cross my threshold do they understand our arrangement in full." Even those vampires who dedicate themselves to opposing their creator, who hunt their own kind, who seek cures, who resist feeding, serve him still. Their rebellion is anticipated, their resistance calculated into the greater design. The curse adapts around their defiance, growing stronger through opposition, like muscles strengthened against resistance. For Molag Bal, vampirism was never merely about corrupting Arkay's domain or creating servants. It was about establishing permanent, self-perpetuating influence in a realm otherwise restricted to him. It was about placing pieces on the board that could move of their own accord while still advancing his position. This is the bitter truth behind every drop of blood spilled by Vampire Fang across Tamriel's long history. Not tragedy, not horror, not even mere predation. Strategy. They call it immortality. They whisper of it as power, the gift of endless nights, of strength beyond mortal limits, of centuries to perfect one's arts, while others wither and die. From Janus Hasseldor's quiet rule to Harkon's terrible ambition, all vampires taste freedom in their first drop of blood. Yet no vampire has ever been truly free. From LeMay's first transformation to the elegant hunters of the Imperial City, from ancient Volkihar beneath the ice to the silent predators of Valenwood, every immortal thread leads back to the same loom. Every bloodline bears the signature of its creator, no matter how many centuries or transformations separate them from that first violation. The chains may stretch across eras, they may thin to invisibility, but they never break.